Indianapolis this morning with Dr. Geisler, my co-author, and we were doing a 12 Points That Show Christianity is True seminar. And we got a question from the audience on the immensity of the universe. I talked about how last week the fact that we are infinitesimal in terms of size, our solar system, to the rest of the universe. And the question came from the audience this morning, well, why do we think there's a God? And why is all this material out there? Why is all this space out there, which we'll get to tonight? And Dr. Geisler had an answer. He said, let's go to Psalm 8. Take a look at Psalm 8 for a second. It says, O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. You have set your glory above the heavens. From the lips of children and infants, you have ordained praise. When you look at a little child, if they're not colicky, most of the time when you see a child, you think, that's a miracle. At least I do. There's just something about a small child that just turns your emotions on, doesn't it? It makes you think there's something wondrous about life. The psalmist says that from the lips of children you have ordained praise. Because of your enemies to silence the foe and the avenger. Now listen, here's what the psalmist says, Psalm of David. When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, what is man that you are mindful of him? This is the question we got this morning. When I consider how awesome this universe is, what do you care about little old me? It's amazing. He says, what is man that you are mindful of him? The Son of Man that you care for him. You made him a little lower than the heavenly beings and crowned him with glory and honor. You made him ruler over the works of your hands. You put everything under his feet, all flocks and herds and the beasts of the field, the birds of the air and the fish of the sea, all that swim in the paths of the seas. O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. God, even though we are insignificant, you've put everything under our dominion on earth. You've put this entire creation here on earth under our dominion. Now, there's obviously things we can't control about it, but we are the supreme creation, is what the psalmist is saying. Go a few psalms up to Psalm 19. Psalm 19, a famous psalm, which says, the heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they display knowledge. There is no speech or language where their voice is not heard. Their voice goes out into all the earth. Their words to the ends of the world. What about the guy in the jungle that's never heard about God? There is no such guy. Now, there are people out there who have never heard of Christ, but there's nobody out there who's never heard of God. Why? Because of the creation. The creation pours forth speech day after day, night after night. When you look up in the heavens and you see this awesome creation, you realize there had to be a creator. And Paul in Romans chapter 1, which we'll eventually get to, unpacks that further. And he says that God's attributes and his invisible qualities are clearly seen so that men are without excuse. There's nobody that doesn't know about God. Oh, there's people that suppress the truth about God. Paul says that too in Romans 1. There's people that deny he exists, but deep down in their hearts, they know he does, and they don't need the Bible to know it. You just look up in the sky and you go, unbelievable. And hopefully after tonight, you'll have some more insight into why the universe is unbelievable, because we're going to get into the design of the universe tonight. Last time we talked about the fact that the universe exploded into being out of nothing. And we gave 5 lines of scientific evidence that it did. Surge, you remember surge? Second law, universe expanding, radiation afterglow, great galaxy seeds, Einstein's theory of general relativity. Says that time, space, and matter leapt into existence out of nothing. So it must be something outside of time, outside of space, outside of matter that brought it into existence. It can't be a natural cause that created the universe, because nature itself was created. So if it's not a natural cause, it must be a supernatural cause. But now we need to deal with the question, when the universe exploded into being, did it do so with any sort of specificity, or was it just like a chaotic explosion, like something just blew up and things went out randomly? We're about to see that it was not a chaotic explosion. Let's go to the PowerPoint for just a second, and we'll give you the big picture again as to what we're doing. The first point we pointed out a number of weeks ago was, does truth exist? And we found, of course, it does. To say that truth does not exist would be self-defeating, right? Somebody says there is no truth, you say, hey, is that true? Somebody says it's true for you but not for me, you say, is that true for everybody? Or go try that with your bank teller. Sure, that's not going to work, is it? Then we got to the question, does God exist? And that's where we are right now. Last week we gave the first argument that God exists. We just went through it, the cosmological argument. This week we're going to give the teleological argument. And here's the teleological argument. Fancy word for design. Don't be put off by it. Design argument, Greek word telos. All right, means design or purpose. And the design argument goes like this. Every design had a designer. The universe and life have highly complex design. Therefore, the universe and life had a designer. I don't think we need to prove argument one, or premise one, I should say. Every design had a designer. We know that. In fact, we'll touch on that a little bit. The key point, though, we need to deal with is point B. The universe and life have highly complex design. Is that true? You know, in Darwin's day, they didn't think life was all that complicated. Today, as you'll see, we know otherwise. Now, back in 1988, there was a professor that did some research into the psychological state of Americans. And he found that the baby boomer generation basically began after World War II, as you know, those of you who were born after World War II. He found that they were 10 times more depressed, or that they were 10 times more likely to be depressed than the previous generation. 10 times! Now, why do you think that is? Why? No purpose. They don't understand what the purpose of life is. The purpose of life is not the satisfaction of your desires. The purpose of life is to know God and make Him known. And we've gotten away from the true purpose, and we've pursued our desires, selfishly pursued our desires, and when we pursue them, we realize that we can't get the happiness or contentment we want. That's why Jesus said, if you want to find your life, what do you need to do? Lose it. If you want to follow me, you've got to deny yourself and take up your cross. You can't get happiness by pursuing it. It's a byproduct of doing what you should do. And what does this have to do with the teleological argument? The teleological argument shows that the universe has purpose, and if the universe has purpose, so do you, because you were created for a purpose. Why did Rick Warren's book, The Purpose-Driven Life, do so well? Because people want purpose. They want to know why they're here. There's got to be something bigger than me. What is it? Why am I here? Some of it is tied up in this argument. You guys ready to go? This is the old William Paley watch argument. If you're walking in the woods and you found this diamond-studded Rolex, you would immediately assume natural law created that, right? No, you would say what? There's got to be a watchmaker. The wind, the rain, erosion doesn't just put together watches. There's always a watchmaker. Well, William Paley came up with this argument. He said every watch implies a watchmaker. So the question is the universe like a watch, or is it not designed at all? That's what we're going to look at. In order to do this, we're going to talk about science. We've already talked about science in argument one, cosmological argument. We're going to really need to define what we mean by science. And if someone were to thrust a microphone in front of your face and say, what is science? What would you say? What would you say? Very good. Science is through inquiry. You're trying to find observation, experiments, And evaluation, very good. Observation, experiment, and evaluation. You're trying to find knowledge, he said. Very good definition. In fact, Sir Francis Bacon, I think, had a simpler definition. Yours is probably more complex, a better definition. But he said true knowledge is knowledge by causes. In other words, science is a search for causes, right? That's what you're trying to do when you do science. You're trying to discover what caused a particular effect, right? Now, stay with me on this. I think observation and repetition are important. Evaluation, as you said, but hold on. There are two types of causes. Here they are. First type of cause, non-intelligent or natural cause, okay? Like gravity. That's a cause, right? If I drop this remote, it's going to go to the ground. What caused that? Gravity. Bang. Right? Takes it right to the ground. But there's another type of cause that scientists don't talk about too often, and that is an intelligent cause. What's an intelligent cause? Well, it could be supernatural, or it could just be a person, say, putting this presentation together, right? That's an intelligent cause. Or you, right now, you're writing. That's an intelligent cause. Somebody writing is an intelligent cause. If somebody finds this tablet in the woods, they're not going to go, oh, look, the raccoons came up here and did that, right? Now, unfortunately, in the creation-evolution debate, what people do is they rule out intelligent causes before they look at the evidence. And so they only can come to a natural cause, which means that they say that only natural causes are scientific causes. I think that's stupid, and I'll show you why. Anyone ever been to the Grand Canyon? Right? You've been to the Grand Canyon? Beautiful geologic formation, right? You can see the canyon there. You see a tree in the foreground, rim in the background. Now, when you try and posit a cause for the Grand Canyon, do you have to assume that some intelligent being, like a big god, stuck his finger down in the canyon down there, or down in the earth to create a canyon? No. What could have caused the canyon like that? A lot of water, right? You bring a lot of water, and you can figure out that a canyon's caused by natural forces, say, brought on by a flood of some kind, maybe. How do we know? Well, through observation and repetition, we can take water and put it on a landmass, and we'll get a canyon or a gully. We do it over and over again, right? Okay? Observation and repetition. Doesn't have to be an intelligent cause doing this, does it? Now, can everybody see the difference between this geologic formation, the Grand Canyon, and this geologic formation, Mount Rushmore? Okay? Now, what caused the faces on Mount Rushmore? Certainly not erosion. Not natural erosion anyway, maybe political erosion, but not natural erosion. Why? Because you can work through observation and repetition from now till doomsday, throwing wind, rain, water out a bunch of rock. You'll never get the 4 presidents on Mount Rushmore there, right? You realize that's an intelligent cause. You with me so far? All right, let's keep moving. All I'm saying here, the two types of causes, natural cause, intelligent cause. Natural cause, Grand Canyon. Intelligent cause, Mount Rushmore. All right, one more thing. What causes the ripples in the sand here, in the sand dune? Wind, right? Do you have to say that, you know, some person came up there and made those little ripples? No. Wind can do that. We see it all the time. Observation, repetition, right? But can everybody see the difference between a sand dune and a sand castle? Can the wind cause a sand castle like that? No way, right? Only intelligence can cause a sand castle. All I'm saying again, natural cause, sand dune. Intelligent cause, sand castle, right? Okay. Now, let's take Mount Rushmore for a second. Now, stay with me on this. This is important stuff. We know when Mount Rushmore was created, right? We saw people create it. We have video of people chiseling in the side of that mountain there in South Dakota. It happened in the early 20th century. In 1930s, sometime then, they made Mount Rushmore, right? We know how it happened. But let's say that we find a structure like Mount Rushmore, and we didn't know anybody, we didn't see anybody, we don't have any eyewitnesses of how that structure was made. This happens to be the Buddhist statues in Afghanistan that the Taliban blew up before, we went over there and blew them up, before 2001. Now, I don't know if you can see this on this side, I'll point it out, but right there, that's a person So those statues were about 40 or 50 stories high. And the Taliban said that these are blasphemous to Allah, so they blew them up. All right? But question, we didn't see anybody do that, so how do we know how those things were created? The Buddha statues. How do we know? Well, we use a principle in science known as the principle of uniformity. It says that causes in the past were like those in the present. Causes in the past were like those in the present. We have to assume that if today it takes an intelligent being to create Mount Rushmore, that in the past it required an intelligent being to create something like Mount Rushmore. Make sense? If we can't assume that, we can't get at the past. Let me give you another illustration of this. June 1994. Police arrive in Brentwood, California, and find Ron Brown and, what's her name? I can't even remember now. Huh? Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown. That's why I got them mixed up. O.J. Simpson's wife and apparently his girlfriend. Or her boyfriend. I'm getting this all mixed up now. Well, in California, you just never know, right? You don't know who's who and who's dating who. But anyway, now when they showed up there, how did they know that those two people weren't killed by lightning or by a natural cause? How did they know that? They were stabbed. What else did they find at the scene? Huh? They were in a house initially, so probably lightning didn't do it. What else was at the scene? Blood and footprints, right? They saw that it was the work of a so-called intelligent being because the person was stabbed in all sorts of different ways, brutally. Both of them were. Now, they couldn't go back into time and recreate the murders, right? They couldn't go in the laboratory and do it over and over again, observation and repetition. All they could do is use the principle of uniformity to say that had to be an intelligent being that did it. They're going to go out now and look for a murderer, okay? Every cop show that you've ever seen on TV uses a type of science that's not observation and repetition like our standard definition. It's called forensic science, right? Police use this all the time. They got to figure out a murder. The only way they can do it is look at clues and piece things together. They can't go back in time. They can't bring the victims back to life and figure out, let's observe this from across the street. They can't do any of that. They can only look at clues and forensically figure out what happened. And that's the way they figure out the past. That's what we're going to do when we look at the universe. We're going to use forensic science to try and discover if the universe was designed or not. By the way, this is exactly what we do when we try and figure out whether we were created or whether we evolved. We use forensic science. None of us were there. None of the evolutionists were there when the first one-celled amoeba popped into existence out of nothing, according to them, right? Or out of non-living chemicals. None of us who say that we were created, we weren't there either. What do? We use forensic science to figure it out. All right, so we're going to apply this to the universe and life, this idea of forensic science and the principle of uniformity. How many are with me so far? All right, let's go. Let's take a look at the universe. What caused the universe? There's only two possibilities, either intelligence or non-intelligence, right? There's no other third alternative. This is called the law of the excluded middle in logic. It's either one or the other. Either intelligence or non-intelligence. Either it was created by an intelligent designer, i.e. a supreme being like God, or it was created by natural law. Now, actually, if you remember from last week, we've already disproved it could have been natural law. It could have been natural law. Why? Because we said that nature itself was created. But anyway, let's just keep going and see where we wind up. What we're going to do is we're going to ask the question, is the universe designed or was it brought together by natural law? Maybe it exploded into being out of nothing, but then it just exploded randomly after that. There was no design to it. All right? What we're going to do is use the principle of uniformity to try and figure out whether the universe was created by an intelligent being or is just by some sort of natural process. Now, you see this little squiggly line here? See, that says 4000 BC. Then there's a squiggly line. This says creation back here. I don't care whether the universe is 10,000 years old, as some of you may believe. I don't care whether the universe is 10 billion years old, as some of you may believe. That's irrelevant to this point. It doesn't matter how far back you go, that if the universe needs a designer, it needs a designer 10,000 years ago, and it needs a designer 10 billion years ago, right? Principle of uniformity. So the age of the universe is not an issue here. That's why I put the squiggly line in there, okay? We can talk about it another time. Let's just be worried about whether or not it was created by intelligence rather than when, okay? All right, let's take a look. We're going to come to the same type of cause. If we see today it was designed, we're going to come to the same type of cause that it was designed yesterday. And this is what scientists call the anthropic principle. It says that the universe was precisely tweaked to support life here on Earth. Anthropos comes from the Greek word which means man. The universe was precisely designed, precisely tweaked so man, i.e. mankind, men, women, could exist. How do we know? Well, our measurement capabilities are getting better and better. And the more we measure this universe and aspects of it, we realize how incredibly precise everything is. Let me give you some examples. Oxygen comprises 21% of the atmosphere. If it were 25%, fires would erupt spontaneously. If it were 15%, we would all suffocate. Oxygen, right level. Secondly, if the universe was expanding at a rate 1/millionth more slowly than it is now, the Earth would not even exist. Thirdly, if the gravitational force were altered by 1 part in 10 to the 40, the sun would not exist and the moon would crash into the Earth or shear off into space. Now you say, 1 part in 10 to the 40, what does that mean? It's a very infinitesimal change. Any scientists in here? What does 1 part in 10 to the 40 mean? Anyone want to explain it? Yes, sir, go ahead.
It's a decimal point, 40 zeros, and then a 1 at the end.
A decimal point, 40 zeros, and a 1 at the end. Let me give you an illustration of this. Suppose I had a long tape measure from that side of the auditorium all the way to the other side of the auditorium by the door, right? And there it's broken up, it's inches, okay? Let's say gravity is set right here. It could be set over here, it could be set over here, regardless of what the units of setting are. Let's just say it's that long. If gravity's set here, if we moved it an inch, life would end. There'd be no life. Well, I just lied to you. You know why? Because the scale is not from that wall to that wall. The scale is the entire width of the universe. And if gravity was moved by 1 inch on that scale, we'd never be here to know about it. That's how precisely tweaked the universe is. Take a look at our solar system. There we are, third rock from the sun, right? We are at the right position in the universe and in the right position in the solar system for life to exist. If we were a little bit closer to, a little bit further from the sun, we either burn up or we'd freeze. If the axial tilt wasn't 23 degrees, 23.5 degrees, we wouldn't be here. You know what keeps the universe or keeps our axial tilt at 23 degrees? The moon. If we didn't have that moon, we wouldn't be here. Our axial tilt would wobble, which would mean what? You'd have to hold on. No, that's not what it would mean. It would mean it would get extremely cold and extremely hot. Kind of like Charlotte in the summer, you know. 23 degrees, just right. If the Earth rotation wasn't 24 hours, we wouldn't be here. If it was faster, the wind velocities across the surface of the Earth would be too great for life. And if it was slower, it would get too hot during the day and too cold during the night. If Jupiter wasn't in its current orbit, we wouldn't be here. Couple of reasons. Jupiter's orbit is the right orbit for us. If Jupiter's orbit was more elliptical than circular, it would pull us out of our circular orbit, which means we'd sometimes get too close to the sun, and sometimes we'd get too far away from it. We'd either burn up or we'd freeze. But Jupiter also acts as a cosmic vacuum cleaner. It attracts all the cosmic space junk and all the meteors to it rather than us. In fact, if you take a close-up look at Jupiter, do you see those purple marks on Jupiter? Those purple marks are comet fragment strikes that are bigger than the Earth. Thank God for Jupiter. Because we wouldn't be here if Jupiter wasn't there. Saturn acts the same way. It acts as a cosmic vacuum cleaner. Now, if you want to take a look at how big Jupiter is, take a look at this. See, there's Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. There we are, Earth. Then Mars, Venus, Mercury, and look at poor Pluto. Now, Pluto, as you know, has recently been demoted. I think it's size discrimination myself. What does it take? 252 years, apparently, for Pluto to go around the Earth, something like that, or go around the sun, I should say. And we just, at one day, say, hey, forget about it. You're not a planet. Don't bother. Why do we do that? Now, take a look at this. If you think that's cool, look at this. Sun, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus. You can't even see Pluto. Now, this is quite an amazing solar system when you think about it. In fact, when you think about our solar system, all those planets and Pluto lined up the way they do and the way they go around the sun, let me ask you a question. Suppose you're in a science class and you're asked to put together a model, and you put together this model of the solar system. Everything works, everything rotates and everything. You have an atheist professor, and he comes by to look at your little model there at the science fair, and there's no name on it, and he says, who did this? And you, the smart aleck student, says, nobody. That's just there. What do you think he's going to say? No, come on, somebody built this. These things just don't happen by chance. All right? Think about it. Now, take our solar system, right? Now, think about our solar system. How big is our solar system compared to our galaxy? Well, first of all, in order to give you perspective, we'd have to shrink our galaxy down to the size of the continental United States. How big would our solar system be if our galaxy was the size of the continental United States? Our solar system would be the size of a quarter on the floor of the Nevada desert, and we'd be a microscopic speck of dust on that quarter. That's why the guy today was asking, why would God care about a microscopic speck of dust on a quarter? What do you think we would think about God and about His creation if the heavens ended at the cloud tops? That was it. That's the whole show, the whole universe right there. That's it. No further. We wouldn't get this sense of awe, would we? But when you think about the immensity of the universe, and we're a quarter, a speck of dust on a quarter, in the continental United States, you realize, man, whoever put this together is awesome. Yeah, that's the point. In fact, there's another anthropic constant. The average distance between stars in our galaxy is 30 trillion miles. That distance is needed for Earth to exist in its present life-supporting position. If the distance were altered, a little bit less, a little bit more, we wouldn't be where we are now. Therefore, no life would exist. Now, you say 30 trillion miles, that's a long way. How far is that? Well, I was out in the Desert Museum a number of years ago in Tucson, Arizona. Have you ever been out in the desert at night? You know how dark it can get because there's no city lights? If it's a clear night, you can see satellites in orbit. So we're out there, and the guide who we're out there with says, hey, it's so clear tonight, we'll be able to see the space shuttle in orbit at about 9:03. It's like, oh, yeah, right. Come on. Space shuttle's only 120 feet long. It's 350 miles up. There's no way we're going to see it. Oh, me of little faith. At 9:03, the guy goes, look! I looked up, and about 70 degrees above the horizon, there it is, the space shuttle. And it's cruising across the sky about like this relative to us. When it got right about here, it disappeared. We couldn't see it anymore. I don't know why, it just vanished. I only saw it for maybe 7 or 8 seconds. Now, the space shuttle, when it's in orbit, is moving between 17,000 and 18,000 miles an hour. That's 5 miles a second. You got trouble getting to work in the morning? Take the space shuttle. You'll be there. 5 miles a second. Well, I did a little calculation to try and figure out how long would it take us to go 30 trillion miles, the average distance between stars just in our galaxy, if we could get in the space shuttle and go 5 miles a second. How long would it take us? It would take us 201,450 years. And the kid would be crying the whole way. Imagine that. How much further, Dad? 5 minutes. Another 5 minutes. Think about that. Over 200,000 years. That means if you were getting the space shuttle at the time of Christ at our star, the sun, and started traveling to another star an average distance away, you'd be less than 1/100th of the way there right now. How many stars are out there? According to scientists, the number of stars out there are about equivalent to the number of sand grains on all the beaches on all the earth. And to go from one sand grain to another sand grain going 5 miles a second will take you over 200,000 years. You want to see this picture here from the Hubble Space Telescope. The one on the left is from the ground. The box, the little box in the middle of the one on the left is this box from the Hubble Space Telescope. Those are stars, heavenly bodies. The heavens are awesome. February 1st, 2003, the President of the United States came into the Oval Office. It was a Saturday morning, 9 a.m. TV camera turned on. Every major network carried his address. Saturday morning. Why? President looked into the camera and he said, "This morning, our country's experienced a great tragedy. The Space Shuttle Columbia, upon re-entry into the atmosphere, burned up in the skies over Texas. There are no survivors." The President went on to quote then from Isaiah chapter 40. If you have a Bible, go to Isaiah chapter 40. Why is he quoting from Isaiah chapter 40? You'll see in a minute. This is God speaking, Isaiah chapter 40, verse 25. God speaking. "To whom will you compare me? Or who is my equal, says the Holy One? Lift your eyes and look to the heavens. Who created all these? He who brings out the starry host, one by one, and calls them each by name. Because of his great power and mighty strength, not one of them is missing." The President then went on to say, the same God that created all those stars knows the names of the 7 astronauts who perished today. While they did not come home to us, we can all now pray they are all safely home. The God who names every star, and there are as many stars as there are sand grains on all the beaches on all the earth, is the same God that made you. Does he have a purpose for you? Psalm 103 verse 11 says, "God's love to those that fear him exceeds the height of the heavens above the earth." How high are the heavens above the earth? From our perspective, it's infinite, right? It's infinite. That's the point. God's love is infinite, no limit. Most Christians have a very small view of God. We think God is like a big angel, or he's our cosmic bellboy. You know, God, I need some help down here. Can you help me out? Well, he's there to do that. But sometimes he does things that we don't quite understand and won't understand until we get to eternity, right? God is infinite. He knows the end from the beginning. He knows how something that happens today may affect somebody 1,000 years from now. You'll never know about it on this earth, on this side of eternity. You want to know who God is? Remove all limits from your mind. That's God. Why is there a second commandment? Make no graven image. One reason is because any image that you make of an infinite God necessarily limits his majesty. You cannot make an image of an infinite being. You can only know God through analogy now. You want to know the closest thing to me, God says? Look to the heavens. From your perspective, it's infinite, but from my perspective, it's nothing. But when you look to the heavens and you consider the immensity and awesomeness of the heavens and how everything's precisely designed, precisely tweaked for us to be here, you realize there has to be an awesome designer. We throw away, I don't even like to use the word anymore, awesome, because we've cheapened it. You know, guy hits a layup. Awesome, dude. You know, we use it for everything. There's only one being that's awesome, and that's God. So what caused the universe? We see today unequivocally it was designed. Using the principle of uniformity, it must have had an intelligent designer behind it. We see so many things about this universe that are just right for us to be here and couldn't have gone any other way, or if it had gone any other way, we wouldn't be here. We know we're here for a reason. We know this universe is precisely designed for us. So that's the cosmological we did last week. We just did some of the teleological, and ultimately we're going to arrive at the moral. But we've got one more aspect of the teleological we need to do, and that is, not only is the universe precisely designed, so is life. Now, when we look at life, we've got to think about our conclusion so far. Context makes a difference. When you look at evidence, context is important. Let me give you an illustration. Suppose I say to you, a man takes a knife and rips open the stomach of a woman. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? You need more context, don't you? Is it necessarily bad? What's the context? Maybe he's a doctor and she's a lady who is undergoing a cesarean section, right? That's maybe a good thing then, right? But if he's in an alley and he's a mugger and then it's a bad thing. So context makes the difference in how you interpret the evidence, right? So let's look at the context of this universe so far. Here's what we see so far. First, since the finite universe, time, space, and matter came into existence, then there must be something infinite, in other words, something outside of time, space, and matter that brought it into existence. That being must be powerful, eternal, and immaterial. Why? Why must he be immaterial? Because he created material. Why must he be eternal? Because he created time. Why must he be powerful? Because he created out of nothing. That's right. In light of the anthropic principle, that being must also be intelligent. You say, well, why couldn't, there be a whole bunch of gods up there that did this? Well, one reason it couldn't be that is because this is the product of one mind, right? You got all these factors that are lined up just the right way so we could be here. It's the product of one mind, not many. This is not a committee. Those are exactly the attributes the Bible applies to God. An intelligent, immaterial, eternal, powerful being. So here's the punchline. Context. Before we look at the origin of life, we need to know that this is a theistic universe. In other words, it's a universe that there's a powerful God who created the universe. If there is a powerful God who created the universe, might he have something to do also with the creation of life? I think so. Good conclusion. All right, let's take a look at life. This is a one-celled amoeba. This is what the Darwinists say we all evolved from. You heard of the theory of macroevolution, from the goo to you via the zoo, right? This is the goo. Or from the infantile to the reptile to the crocodile to the gentile, okay? This is the infantile. Now, in Darwin's day, as I mentioned earlier, they didn't think this was anything really too complicated. They thought this was just a blob of protoplasm, not much to it. Maybe, you know, in a warm pond somewhere, by natural processes, this could come into existence, and from there, we're often running to human beings through natural processes. Well, that's not the case, because we know a lot more now. Here's what we know. First of all, let's talk about the fact, again, there's only two possibilities. Either the first life came into existence by intelligence or by non-intelligence, right? There's no other possibility. Either there was intelligence behind it or there wasn't. All right? So we're going to use that same principle we've been using, that principle of uniformity. Was the first life created by intelligent design or natural law? And we're going to figure out, by using the principle of uniformity, that if we find today that an amoeba and the minimal amount of life is designed, then we're going to assume that yesterday, however far back you go, it also required intelligence, right? Now, today it could come together by natural law, then we'll assume that yesterday it came together by natural law. You with me? All right. In order to do this, I got to take you to your breakfast table. How many like alphabet cereal? Let's suppose you want to have a bowl of alphabet cereal one day. You come down, you're a teenager, you come downstairs, and you see the alphabet cereal is knocked over on the table, and on the placemat the letter spelled, take out the garbage, Mom. What are you going to assume? The cat knocked the box over? Earthquake shook the house? No, you're going to say that's intelligent design from an intelligent being, right? Why? Well, you know, from now to doomsday, if you try and knock that alphabet cereal over, you'll never get take out the garbage, Mom. Natural laws don't do that. That's always a sign from an intelligent being. Or let's suppose you're laying out on the beach and you see in the clouds, drink Coke. What do you assume? Unusual cloud formation? Wind coming from the north today? Oh, no, I got it. Cloud evolution. No, even though you didn't see the skywriter up there, you knew he had to be up there at some point, because only minds create messages. And that's what this is. It's a message. So if only minds can create take out the garbage, Mom, or drink Coke, only minds can create DNA. What's DNA? DNA is a 4-letter genetic alphabet that is in every living thing. You have DNA, I have DNA, a dog has DNA, a banana has DNA. And a DNA, this 4-letter genetic alphabet, communicates information. It codes your makeup, if you will, your physical makeup. It's like a software program. And these 4 letters communicate information much like our 26-letter genetic alphabet, or 26-letter English alphabet communicates information, except the English alphabet is 26 letters, this one only has 4. Now the question is, how much DNA is in a one-celled amoeba? The point I want to make here is that DNA can communicate a message like take out the garbage, Mom, except in living things, it's a lot more complicated than take out the garbage, Mom. How much information, DNA information, is in a one-celled amoeba? What I'm about to tell you is not from a Christian. It's actually from Richard Dawkins, our atheist, Darwinist, evolutionist friend, who wrote the book The God Delusion. In previous years, he wrote a book called The Blind Watchmaker. And in his book, The Blind Watchmaker, Dawkins admits that the amount of information in a one-celled amoeba is about equivalent to 1,000 complete sets of Encyclopedia Britannica. 1,000 complete sets of Encyclopedia Britannica in an amoeba. How big's an amoeba? Well, let's put it this way. You can put several hundred in an inch if you lined them up. And in each one, you've got 1,000 complete sets of Encyclopedia Britannica. Now, to believe that that resulted by natural law without intelligence is like believing that the Library of Congress resulted from an explosion in a printing shop. I don't have enough faith to believe that. The first life requires intelligent cause. It requires an intelligent cause. In fact, the 4-letter genetic alphabet, I don't have time to share this little video, but the little video says this. The DNA of one human cell equals 5 million pages of information. That's 25,200 books worth of information in every cell in your body. All of that is crammed into the nucleus of a cell, which is 1/100th the width of a human hair. There are 25,200 page books in a cell the nucleus of which is 100th the width of a human hair. And you have about 100 trillion cells. You just made 4 million new red blood cells. You just made another 4 million new red blood cells. And another 4 million. Knock it off! You're an incredible creation. In fact, let's go way back. Way back when you were just in your daddy, for you adults, if you know what I mean. When your daddy's piece of you got together with your mama's piece of you, you began replicating cells at 4,000 cells a second. Some of your cells that formed you became brain cells, obviously. Others became heart cells. Others became liver cells and pancreas cells. Nobody knows how these cells knew what to become. But some of them walked so far across the organism that was you that it would be comparable to walking across the United States for us. In fact, your daddy's piece of this whole thing, I'm sorry to speak in code, but I see some young people here. Your daddy's piece of this whole thing, just to make sure that he got to your mama's piece, he sent 300 million of his pieces down to your mama's piece. Then there was a race. And you won. You are amazing. And in fact, proportionally, if you wanted to run or swim, I should say, as fast as you were at that point, you would have to swim at 34,000 miles an hour. That's twice the speed of the space shuttle. You'd have to go basically you'd have to swim 10 miles a second to go as fast as you were going back then. You didn't need steroids. You didn't need a masseuse. You didn't need any special diet. You were just cruising. And you got there. You won. You did. And of course, your daddy's piece had half the genetic information that you would need for the rest of your life, and your mama's piece had the other half. And your mama's piece, when that whole thing began, was about the size of a period at the end of a sentence. And from your daddy's piece and your mama's piece, here you are. How did that all happen? Just an accident. I don't have enough faith to believe there's not a creator behind that. Let's give another illustration with regard to cells. If a house represented your little toe, the cells of your toe would be represented by baby peas that filled the house, floor to ceiling, wall to wall. And each one of those peas would have 25,200-page books in them. Think about that. As human beings, we've never even created something as complicated as a cell. How could the four blind forces of nature create any of this? What are they? When we talk about natural law doesn't do anything. Natural law simply describes what the four natural forces do. Anyone know what the four natural forces are? What are they? No. What? Go ahead. No, that's not it. That's what Aristotle thought. You're going wind, fire. No. Well, I already mentioned one of them. Gravity's one. Gravity, electromagnetism, and the strong and weak nuclear forces. Those are the only four natural forces that we know about. The Darwinists, the evolutionists, have to figure out how we could get 25,200-page books in a cell by those four natural forces. They have to figure out how a one-celled amoeba with 1,000 complete sets of Encyclopedia Britannica came into existence by 4 natural forces: gravity, strong and weak nuclear forces, and electromagnetism. How does that happen? And by the way, where did gravity, the strong and weak nuclear forces, and electromagnetism come from? You ever think about that? I mean, we talked about you'd have to believe that an explosion in a printing shop created the Library of Congress. Well, the Darwinists can't even explain where the printing shop came from. Right? So what caused life? Today we see undisputably it was created by an intelligent designer. So using the principle of uniformity, what should our conclusion be? What should our conclusion be? Intelligent designer. Yes, but our school curriculum says natural law. A couple of weeks after 9/11, I went to the office of, with a couple other folks, Eric Smith. Remember his name? He was the superintendent of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. We gave him a little presentation like this. And we got to this point in the presentation, everyone in the presentation went, "Oh." I said, "Yeah, why are we teaching this?" He said, "Well, actually, we don't make these decisions. Raleigh does. And in Raleigh, they're not changing their textbooks for another 5 years." Right? Well, they won't change their textbooks after 5 years or 5 years after that. Why not? Well, first of all, they don't want to. But secondly, who do they fear? The American Anti-Christian Liberties Union. That's it, the Anti-Christian Liberties Union. They fear the ACLU because the ACLU will bring a lawsuit if anyone even utters the name creator or creation or God or intelligent design. So they're scared into doing nothing. We're teaching nonsense in our government schools today. That's why if you're teaching in the government schools, keep teaching there. Maybe you can get some truth in there. What caused human life? Let's just do this and we'll finish up. Forget about an amoeba. So let's go to human life for a second, okay? We're going to use the same principle of uniformity, and we're going to figure out whether it was designed or not. What do you think we're going to come? What conclusion are we going to come to? Gee, I wonder. There's 1,000 volumes for a one-celled amoeba. How about the human brain? How about the human brain? What I'm about to tell you is from Carl Sagan. You know, Carl Sagan was an agnostic, but he talked like an atheist. And Carl Sagan really thought the only thing that existed was materials. The universe is the only thing that ever was, is, or shall be. Right? Very materialistic. And your incredible brain. What's in your incredible brain? Let's take an arena like Madison Square Garden, which has nearly 20,000 seats in it. The Bobcats Arena has how many? I don't even know. Close to that, right? Let's suppose you're permitted to go down on the floor, say in Madison Square Garden before a basketball game or the Bobcats Arena, and there's nobody on the floor, there's nobody in the stands, and you're looking at 20,000 empty seats all around you. How many books would you need to stack on every seat to fit the amount of DNA information in your brain? This is probably an underestimate, but this is from Sagan. You'd have to stack 1,000 books on every seat. Not in every section, but in every seat in every section to fit the amount of information between your ears. As Sagan said, the brain is a very big place in a very small space. Think about that. You'd have to blow the roof off that place and keep stacking. That's what's between the ears of every person in this room. You're an incredible creation. So if there's DNA information, there's a message behind Take Out the Garbage Mom, or a messenger, I should say, behind Take Out the Garbage Mom. Think of what must be behind 20 million volumes worth of information, because there's 20 million volumes worth of information between your ears. 1,000 books on every seat in Madison Square Garden. Now, how many saw the movie Contact? Now, you remember the movie Contact? Jodie Foster's in there. And here's the premise of the movie. This was a real program, not just a movie, by the way. SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, is an organization or a group that for years was government funded for a while, was scanning the radio waves of space. Why? Because they're looking for evidence of life out there. And there's all sorts of random radio waves flying around space out there. How are they going to know whether one of them is really from intelligence? How would they know? They're going to get a certain pattern, a message, something called specified complexity. There's going to be information to it in a certain pattern. It's not going to be random. So Jodie Foster, remember from the movie, she's sitting out on her car, she's got her headsets on, and suddenly she goes, oh, and she runs into the laboratory there. And they're analyzing this radio wave they picked up, and she starts going, 1, 3, 4. Those are primes. Those are prime numbers from 1 to 111. That's got to be intelligence. Before you know it, all the feds converge on her laboratory there. James Woods, who plays a Fed, says, how can this be intelligence? Come on. If they're so intelligent, why don't they just speak English? And Jodie Foster says, because math is the only universal language. And she's right. Every alphabet you can reduce to numbers. How did we break the Japanese code in World War II? We reduced their code that they're sending to numbers. We could figure it out. We could decipher it. Now, they found this message, which was a simple prime number sequence from 1 to 111 or whatever it was. And later they found a bigger message embedded in it, but she knew immediately it was intelligence. And Sagan said this about establishing SETI. He said, if we could just find one message from outer space, it would be worth a great price. And they asked him, well, how long would the message need to be, Carl? And he said, oh, just a sentence or two. That would prove that there's intelligence out there. That would prove that E.T. is out there. Oh, a sentence or two. Well, here's my question. If a sentence or two proves that E.T. is out there, why doesn't 20 million volumes prove that God, the Creator, is out there too? I mean, Sagan is inconsistent. On one hand, he says one sentence proves that there's intelligence, but 20 million volumes worth of sentences doesn't? That doesn't make any sense to me. You got to have a lot more faith to be a Sagan, to be an agnostic or an atheist than you do to be a Christian. So what caused human life? Again, there's no surprise here. We see today it's designed, it must have required intelligence. This guy was not a Christian, but he admitted. Sir Fred Hoyle said, a common sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a super intellect has monkeyed with physics as well as chemistry and biology, and that there are no blind forces worth speaking about in nature. Everything seems to be designed. There's an elegance behind our universe. Things are tweaked just right. Why is that? Well, for me, in light of the anthropic principle and the complexity of life, I don't have enough faith to be an atheist.